We begin today the Gemara on Daf Yud Gimel, 5 lines from the top of the Yamud, going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Keitzad poiteres tzariseim v'chulu. So this is the halach in the Mishnah that an erva paters a tzara from doing yibum. Then the Mishnah continued that it also paters the tzara of a tzara. If that tzara went and got married to one of the brothers that she's allowed to get married to, and he has a second wife, a tzara, passes away without children, so then, because she's a tzara of this tzara that was a tzara to the erva, so there's no yibum for the tzara of the tzara. From where do I know that not only the tzara is pater of yibum, but even the tzara of the tzara? Rav Yehuda, the Omakra, the pasuk says litzra. In that pasuk where it teaches me that for an erva there's no yibum, as we had it in the beginning, towards the beginning of the Masechta. Aleha b'chayel, the word aleha taught me that even in the case of a mitzvah of yibum, there's still the erva of achayis ishta and all the other arayis that are chayav kara still apply. So in that pasuk it says litzra legalis arvasa. So because it says litzra with two reishes, I learned from this hatayra ripsa tzaris harba. The Torah is telling me that when there's no yibum for the erva, and therefore the tzara is also no yibum for, and she's also considered to be asa because of eishes ach, that extends to another tzara, as far as it can go. Ravashi says, svarihi. This is a svara. The fact that the erva affects the tzara, and then the tzara affects another tzara, you don't need an extra reish over here in this pasuk of litzra, but it's a svara. What's the svara? Tzara my time masira. What's the reason why the tzara will be aser when you have the erva? So the reason is the b'mokim erva kaima. Because when you have an erva, and this erva cannot get married to the yavam, and therefore the isser of eishesach applies, so that isser of eishesach applies also to the tzara. Because the tzara is the tzara of this erva, I see here from the pasuk litzra that the isser of eishesach applies to the tzara as well. So the point is that now the tzara of the erva in her own right becomes an erva of eishesach. That's what the word litzra here is teaching me. So therefore, I continue this and I say as well, tzara nami b'mokem erva kaima. So if so, the second tzara, that's the tzara of the first tzara, that now in her own right became like a erva for herself, an eishes ach for herself. So therefore, that applies to the second tzara as well, that she's a tzara of an erva, and therefore there's no din of yibum for her. So therefore, this is a svara that it continues to the second or the third or the fourth tzara. I don't need an extra pasuk of litzra to teach me this. The Gemara continues, going back to the Mishnah. It said, Keitzad meisu hein chulu. So regarding the case of a tzara serva, that it becomes pater from yibum, so that's only if the erva is still alive or still married to the brother that passed away. But as the Mishnah there said, if the brother that passed away, the erva passed away first, or he divorced her first, and so on. So then, for the tzara, there will be yibum. So now the Gemara is medayik here from the language of the Mishnah, that what are we speaking about? The person was married to an erva. The first brother was married to an erva, and then va'afila kinis, he went and got married to a second wife, to a tzara, ulubesayv girish, and then afterwards he divorced the original the erva. So in other words, the point here is that there was a point in time where he was married to both, to the erva and to the tzara. Afterwards, he divorced the erva. Even in such a case, I said that doesn't matter that they were married together to this brother that passed away, but as long as now, after he passed away, so the erva is already gone, divorced her, or she passed away from before, so then you could do yibum for the tzara. That's what it comes out from the language of our Mishnah. I'll ask you a contradiction on this. There's another Mishnah later that discusses this, and there it seems to say, or it says pretty clearly, that it's only in a case where the tzara and the erva were never married to this person at the same time. So the Mishnah there says as follows: Gimel achim, there were 3 brothers, shnayim mehem nesuim beis achayis. 2 of the brothers are married to 2 sisters. And then ve'echad nasi nachris. The third brother is married to an unrelated wife. So what happened now? Girish echad mi balei achayis ishtay. So the first thing the Mishnah points out is that one of the brothers divorced his wife, which is one of the sisters. The other brother is married to a sister, so one of the brothers divorced his wife. Then Again, Girish echad mi balei achoyes ishtay. She divorced, so he divorced his wife, that is. And then the next thing that happened is umeis hanosui nochris, the brother that was married to this unrelated wife, the third brother, passed away, and now vikinsa hamegarish, this brother that had previously divorced his wife that was one of the sisters, went and was miyabim this unrelated wife from the third brother. So pay attention right over here. You see that the order in the Mishnah, the way it's presenting this is that there was never a point in time where this brother that did this yibum now had the two wives that he was married to. The sister of his brother's wife, and also this unrelated wife, which would be the tzara. No, the Mishnah puts the order as follows. First, what happened was he divorced the sister of his brother's wife. Then, after that, he was miyabim, this unrelated wife, which would be the tzara. And then the Mishnah continues, what happens? Umeis. Now this brother that was miyabim, this unrelated wife, passes away. So the question is, could the surviving brother do yibum for this tzara? So the Mishnah there concludes, Zuhisha Amru, this is exactly what it said in the Mishnah, in the beginning of the Masechta, She'im Meisu, Einis Garshu, Tzariseim Mutaris, that if the wife which was an erve passed away before, or was divorced before, so then the tzara would be allowed to do yibum. So now the Gemara says, if you look at the order of the way case is presented there in that Mishnah, the reason why you can do yibum for the tzara is the girish v'achakach kines, because the brother that divorced first his wife, which was a sister to this yavam, that erva was divorced first, and only afterwards did he get married to this unrelated wife, to this tzara. So they were never married together to this brother that now passed away. Aval kines v'achakach girish. But you understand from that Mishnah, if the case would have been the opposite, that first he married, or he was miyavim, this nachris, this unrelated wife, and she now became a tzara to this erva, and he was still married to this erva, and he only divorced the erva afterwards, or she died afterwards, then the tzara would not be able to do any yibum to the surviving brother in the end there. So that's not like what it said in our Mishnah, that as long as when the brother passes away, the erva is not alive anymore, even if they were married together to this brother, you could do yibum. Rabbi Yirmiyah answers to this contradiction here. Tavra, this is a really strong question. This is a contradiction of these two Mishnahs. And Misha Shanazu, Lai Shanazu. The one that says the halacha of our Mishnah is not the one that says the halacha of that Mishnah later. And the Gemara explains, Hi Tana, the Tana of our Mishnah here in the beginning of the Masechta, Savar, his opinion is Misa Mapelas, that the Mapelas refers to the Yibum. At what point do we look at the Yibum process beginning? What causes the Yibum process to begin? When this brother that had no children passed away. That's when the Yibum begins. So if at that point there's no erva here anymore, it doesn't matter if when he was alive he was married to both the tzara and the erva together, because at that point there was no yibum to talk about. If from the point that he passes away, which causes the yibum to come into being, then the erva is gone, so then the tzara could do yibum. She's not a tzara of an erva. That's the Tana of our Mishnah. But for High Tana, the Tana later, that we quoted the Mishnah from later, over there, Sava, he holds Nisuin Harishainim Mapilim. The cause of the Yibum, even though the actual Yibum doesn't start until later if he passes away without children, but ultimately the cause of the Yibum starts with the fact that he got married to this wife. And therefore from that point we have to look at whether this tzara was married to this person together with an erva. If he was married to her together with an erva, so then there'll never be any yibum for this tzara, even if the erva passes away before the husband passes away. That's what Rabbi Yirmiyah says. It's a machlokes. The Gemara continues. Rava Amar. Rava disagrees and it says, no, it's not an argument here. La'olam, really chatanahu. It's all one Tana saying the halacha of our Mishnah and the halacha of the Mishnah later. Vizu ve'ein tzarich lo mezu katani. This is a case where you have sometimes the Mishnah saying a halacha, and it says the bigger chiddush first, and then it says later a continuation of this, and it says the halacha even less of a chiddush, needless to say that in this case she would be able to do yibum. So in our Mishnah it says the bigger chiddush, that even if they were married together to this brother that passed away, but as long as the erva passed away first or was divorced first before he died, then the tzara could do yibum. And later it speaks about a case which is even less of a chiddush. Needless to say, that if by the time when the tzara got married to this person, the erva was already gone, for sure you could do yibum. So it's not a contradiction. It's not. In other words, it's the same opinion here. So the Gemara weiter, going back to the Mishnah, it said v'chol sheyichayla l'moin, that any time you have an erva that's a katana, and she's able to be memayin, as we've learned before about the halacha of miyun, that a katana is able to reject this whole marriage. So then the Mishnah said that in such a case, if she was not memayin, so then the tzara will not be able to do yibum because of this katana, which is an erva, but because that marriage of the katana is not a marriage of minatayra, it's only a marriage of midrabanon, so therefore the tzara will do chalitza. If she still could do miyun, and she was not memayin yet, and therefore we're saying that the tzara can't do yibum, but only chalitza, but why shouldn't this katana do a miyun right now? Let her reject this marriage right now, even after her husband passed away. Let her come and say, I'm not interested in this whole zika, in this whole connection, in this whole marriage to my original husband, and to this whole zika to the new yabam. And then v'tisyabim. And that will allow the tzara to go ahead and do the regular yibum to the brother. The Gemara says the fact that the Mishnah doesn't say that this is an option, should this not be a proof to what Rabbi Oishia said? Now, Rabbi Oishia's opinion is Dam Rabbi Oishia mimam enes limamorei ve'ena mimam enes lizikosei, that she has the ability to be memayin. So this is going as Rashi quotes. This is a Gemara later where Beis Hillel over there says that this katana has the ability to be memayin bebal ubeyavam. She could be memayin in her husband that she got married to, or her brothers really married her off to her husband, or she could be memayin in her yavam. So Rabbi Shia says, yes, she could be memayin in her husband. That's the halacha of miyun. When Beis Hillel says that she could be memayin in the yavam, what that means is, if the yavam went and did the kedushin of maimer, which is a kedushin b'derabbanan, as we learned about before, in that kedushin she could be memayin. But she cannot, according to Rabbi Shia, she cannot be memayin in the zika. If she's now in this condition where she has to go and do a yibum with her yivama, she can't be memayin in this zika. That's not an option for her. That's not in her ability to be memayin in that. So that's what it seems like. Again, let's see in the words of the Gemara, she could be memayin in the yavam if the yavam was mekadesher. But this zika, this connection that she has to go and do yibum, that she can't be memayin in. So that's the pshat in our Mishnah. That's why the Mishnah doesn't give this as an option, that she should be memayin in the zika. So the Gemara answers, loy. That's not the pshat. Even if she could be memayin, in this case, the tzara of this erva, even if she'll be memayin, it's too late. We won't allow the tzara to go and do yibum. She could only do chalitza. Why? So the Gemara explains, tzaras erva shani. By the tzara of this katana, which could do miyun, but she's an erva, over here the miyun is not going to help the tzara anymore. Why not? So here the Gemara brings something we had before, which is basically the point of marasayin. Tani Rami Bar Yecheskel said as follows. What happens again, this case of a katana gets married to somebody and she could always be memayin. So now miyan or bebal, if she was memayin in the marriage to her husband, then muteres laviv, she rejects and removes the entire marriage as if she was never married to him, and therefore the father could go and marry this girl, which was technically his daughter-in-law, but because she removed the entire marriage, it's like the marriage never happened. Rashi says it's going to be like mufutas aviv, like she had a relation with his son, but it's like the marriage never happened, and therefore now she can go and get married to the father even. But mina biyavam asur laviv. But if her husband already passed away, and now she had a zika, because of this she was obligated to go and have a yibum with a brother, at that point if she's going to be memayin, it's too late. The father will not be able to get married to her. Why not? The Gemara explains, as we had before already, Alma mishas nefile niris kekalasai. If it's already after her husband passed away, and that created a zika that she now has to go to yibum, to the brother, that shows how strong this connection of this marriage was, that it created the zika. So even if she's going to be memayin at this point, it's too late. In the eyes of people, it looks like that this was a real marriage, and therefore it created the zika, and therefore the father will never be able to get married to her because she looks like his daughter-in-law. So therefore the Gemara says we apply the same over here, hachanami here as well, even if it's true that not like Rabbi Yishia, that this Ketana could be Memayin, but at this point, even after she's going to be Memayin, it's not going to enable the Tzara to go ahead and do Yibum, because she's a Tzara of an Erva. Mishas Nefila Niras Ketzaras Bitay. From the time of the Zikah, so this Tzara looks like the Tzara of the daughter. The Gemara is using one example of an Erva, that when this Miyun is of a daughter of the Yavam, or the same thing would be by any of the other cases of the Arayis that are mentioned in the Mishnah. So the point is, even if she will do Miyun now, but it's too late. It looks like that this tzara was a tzara of an erva because it already created a zikir, so therefore the tzara cannot do a yibum anymore, only chalitza, as the Mishnah said. Okay, we finally continue to the second Mishnah here in this Perek. This is quoted already before in the Gemara. Now we have another 6 arayas that are more stringent than the 15 that were mentioned in the beginning of the Masechta. Now these 6 arayas are women that could only get married to somebody else. It's impossible that any of these 6 arayas should get married to one of the brothers here, that we can say that now when this brother passes away, that now becomes the erva to the yavam. It's impossible. These 6 arayas cannot get married to any brothers. They can get married to somebody else. So it doesn't ever come up in a scenario of yibum. And therefore, tzareseyen mutaris, the tzara of this erva is allowed to go and get married to the one that the erva is an erva to. The erva does not affect the tzara. The erva only affects the tzara by the mitzvah of yibum. And here again, Rashi brings up the explanation that we had earlier in the Masechta, that the point is that when there's a case of a yavam, or yavama that is, which is the erva, so then the mitzvah of yibum doesn't apply, and the isur of eishes ach returns, and once the isur of eishes ach returns, that isur of eishes ach is automatically applied to the tzara as well. So that's all by the mitzvah of yibum. But if we're talking about an erva and a tzara that are married to somebody, and there's no mitzvah of yibum that's involved over here, so just because the erva is an erva, that isser does not extend over to the tzara. The tzara of the erva could get married to whoever she wants. That's the point that the Mishnah is saying here. And the Mishnah brings, what are these 6 arayas? Imai, person's mother, we had this before in the Gemara, the Eishes Aviv, or your father's wife. The Gemara before explained that because it says your father's wife, and Imai should really be included in that. So Imai is the anusa of a father. Then v'achais aviv, a father's sister, achaisai mei aviv, or your sister, but that share the same father. Ve'eshes achi aviv, the wife of the father's brother. Ve'eshes achiv mei aviv, or your brother's wife, if they share the same father. These are all arayas that none of the brothers could get married to. Only somebody totally unrelated can get married to her. And therefore, as I said, this doesn't come up in the mitzvah of yibum, where this wife that would fall to yibum to a brother. So therefore, over here, there's no din of tzara serva. Now, the Gemara brings, in the Mishnah here, it brings a machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding the whole din that we've been learning all the time, regarding the din of tzaras erva in the case of yibum. So Beis Shammai disagrees with this whole thing. Beis Shammai matirin hatzares lachem. Beis Shammai say that this whole din that there's no yibum for an erva is only for the erva herself, but not for the tzara of the erva. The tzara of the erva could get married to any of the brothers, could do yibum. Beis Hillel loisren, but Beis Hillel say no, that it's not allowed. It's just like the din that we learned in the first Mishnah, that if there's no yibum for the erva that is, so that affects the tzara as well, that there's no yibum for the tzara. So the Mishnah weiter, another few things that come out over here from this machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Cholzu, what happens if one of the tzaras went and did chalitza from one of the brothers? Beis Shammai poislim and akona. Beis Shammai say that chalitza is legitimate, it takes effect, and therefore she will become possible to marry a kohen. One of the psulim in the Rabbanon to marry a kohen is a chalutza. So since according to Beis Shammai, Etzara could go and get married to any of these brothers, because she's not affected by the erva, so therefore the chalitza is legitimate. So therefore she'll become possible to kohona. Beis Hillel machshirin. Beis Hillel say the chalitza is nothing. The whole chalitza didn't do anything, because she can't bechlal. She's not shaykh to the only of yibum bechlal, and not chalitza at all. So the chalitza is nothing. So she's still kosher to get married to a kohen. The same thing, similar thing, that is, Nisyabmo, if the tzara went and was Nisyabim, had a Yibum, got married to one of the brothers, so Beishamai Machshirin, Beishamai say that even after this, she would still be kosher to marry a Kohen, and that is if her Yavam dies and now she becomes an Almana. So as an Almana, she can go and get married to any Kohen. Beis Hillel Paislan, Beis Hillel say, if this tzara of the Erva went and one of the Yevamos, the Yavam was miyavim her, so now she becomes pasul. Why does she become pasul? So Rashi explains again, Beis Hillel's opinion is that she's an erva, she's like a isakaris of Eishes Achiv. She's not allowed to do any Yivum with any of the brothers. And therefore if she does, so then this is a Zaina. One of the women that a Kohen is not allowed to get married to is a Zaina. And a Zaina is someone that has a relation which is an isakaris. So just like for the Erev it's Isakaris, for the Tzara it's Isakaris, like we learned in the first Mishnah, this is Beis Hillel's opinion, so this will passel her to get married to a Kohen. Now the Mishnah continues and says as follows, Afal pi she'elu oisrin ve'elu matirin. Even though as we see here, these are saying that it's Aser and these are saying that it's Mutter. Right? With the Machlokes say between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai says that the Tzara could get married, Beis Hillel say that the Tzara cannot. And Elu paislin ve'elu machshirin. And Beis Shammai says that the chalitza will make pasul, and Beis Hillel says it won't, and so on. The machlokes here, nimnu Beis Shammai milisa nashim Beis Hillel. Nevertheless, the people, the talmidim from the house of Beis Shammai did not hold themselves back of getting married to women from Beis Hillel. V'loi Beis Hillel mi Beis Shammai, and the talmidim of Beis Hillel did not hold themselves back from getting married from those from Beis Shammai. Even though there may be an issue of Yerva Isakaris. According to Beis Shammai, he's allowing Yibum in a case for the Tzara, which Beis Hillel considers to be Isakaris. And Ashi here brings the rule that we had before, and the Gemara will bring later again, that if you have a relation with a woman which is Isakaris, the children are Mamzedim. If you have a relation only from Isalav, then according to most opinions, the children are not Mamzedim. So the Machlekes here is a huge Machlekes. According to Beis Hillel, what Beis Shammai is allowing to do is really mamzedim, and nevertheless, Beis Hillel will get married to the people, to those that from Beis Shammai, even those that were going according to Beis Shammai. Rashi here brings the conclusion of the Gemara. The Gemara will discuss this. How is this possible? And the Gemara's conclusion is because in a case where there was a question about this, so Beis Shammai would let Beis Hillel know about this case, that if it was a tzara that got married and Beis Hillel disagreed and Beis Hillel held that this is a chiyuv kares, Beis Shammai students would let Beis Hillel know about this. So they relied on that. And therefore, they did not hold themselves back from getting married to wives that came from Beis Shammai. Similar, the Mishnah says, kol atares v'atmeis, all different kinds of halachas of tumah and tara, shayu elim v'taran ve'elim v'tamen, that these would say that it's Toir and those would say that it's Tameh, the arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but nevertheless, nimnu oisin tares elo gabe elo. They did not hold themselves back from using vessels from one another, even in a case where they wanted to keep it pure, and they're relying on the others, even though their opinion is different than theirs. Again, over here, again, as we'll see later in the Gemara will say because the reason they relied was because in a case where there was a question, they let them know that according to your opinion you can't rely on this, so therefore they shared with one another their vessels. The Gemara will explain the opinion of Beis Shammai that says regarding a tzaras erva that only the erva is pater from Yibum, but it does not pater the tzara of an erva. Rab Shimon ben Pazi, my time of the Beis Shammai, what's the reason of Beis Shammai's opinion? The Chsiv, the pasuk says, Leisieh eishes hameis achutza leish zar, that a Yevamos, the wife of the brother that passed away, is not allowed to go and get married to anybody. She has to have either Yibum or Chalitza from one of the brothers. Now the word hachutza here is extra. The simple taich of hachutza refers to going out, to marrying somebody else. But because it's an extra word, the Gemara will translate the word hachutza to refer to one of the wives of this brother that passed away. So the Gemara chutza, we're talking about this wife that's a chutza, meaning she is the tzara that's not related, that's not an erva. Miklal de pnimis. That means that there's two wives here. There's a wife that's called a pnimis, meaning that she is an erva, she's related to the brother. And then there's the wife that's called chutza, she's on the outside, she's not related. And what is the pasuk saying? V'amar Rachmana, the Torah is saying, Loisia, that this wife that's a tzara to the erva, but she's on the outside, she herself is not an erva, she's only a tzara to the erva, the lav of leisia also applies to her because she does have the mitzvah of yibum or chalitza. She's not affected by the fact that the erva does not. So the way to read the pasuk according to Beishami is leisia eishes hameis, the wife of the mace should not be. And which wife of the mace are we talking about? Ha chutza, the wife that's unrelated, the tzara, should not go out and get married lishzar because the mitzvah of yibum does apply to her. Well, Beis Hillel, how does Beis Hillel teach this pasuk? Beis Hillel holds, like we learned in the first Mishnah, that the din of erva applies to the tzara as well, that there's no mitzvah of yibum. Look at the Rav Yudah Marav. So he translates this pasuk more in the simple pshat, like Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav. Rav Yudah Marav, minayin, from where do I know, she'en kedushin toivsim bi Yevamos, that the Kiddushin will not take effect in a Yevamos if someone from the outside, not her Yavam, goes and is Mekadosh her, the Kiddushin will not take effect. As Rashi points out, this is a Chiddush, because we learned before in the Gemara that according to most opinions, only for a Chi of Kares, if you Mekadosh Isha, the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. For a Isalav, it does take effect. But over here, it's only a Isalav, Leisi Eshes HaMeis. But nevertheless, we're going to learn from this pasuk that the Kiddushin will not take effect. Shenema leisia eishes hameis achutza leish zar. What does leisia mean? Leisia ba'avaya. Leisia means that there should be no Kiddushin. Havaya is a terminology used for Kiddushin, that the Kiddushin does not happen, never takes effect. Lizar, for if when she goes and gets married to a zar. Or Beishamai, and how does Beishamai translate this? How do they learn out this halacha? Miksiv lichutz. Could you say that this is what the pasuk is coming to say, that the Kiddushin will not take effect if she's going to get married to someone outside? But does the pasuk say lichut, that she's going to outside, she's going to get married to someone else and the Kiddushin doesn't take effect? Chutza ksiv. The Torah uses the term chutza. Chutza seems to describe someone that's already outside, not going to outside, like what a lamed means, but chutza means she is outside. So therefore he says the pasuk is referring to that wife which is outside of the erva, and she's the tzara, and she is still mechuyev in the mitzvah of yibum. Beis Hillel respond to this diuk about the pasuk saying chutza and not lichutz. Even the chsiv chutza, if it says chutza with the hey at the end of the word, keman the chsiv lichutz dami. That's the same like saying lichutz, to the outside. Chutza also is translated as to the outside. Where do we find this? Because the Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Rav Nechemya Oime, Kol Tevish Etzricha Lamed B'tchilasa, Hitla Kasavei B'Seifa. You have many times, you have a word that needs a lamed in the beginning, which means to outside in this case. So the Torah will write a hey at the end, and the hey has the same translation as the lamed in the beginning. So over here as well, it's as if it says lichutz. And I have a ton of the Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel learned also in the Braise, and he brings a lot of examples for this. Kagoin Elim, Elima. Elima means two Elim. Machanoim, Machanoima. Mitzrayim, Mitzrayima. Divlasaima, Yerushalma, or Hamid Bara. These are all psukim that say the hey at the end, and it means to Yerushalayim and so on, meaning that the hey is like a lamed. Beishamai, now the Gemara asks, so now according to Beishamai, Rav Yudah Marav Minalahu. From where does he know this halacha that Rav Yudah said in the name of the Rav, that if a Yevamos goes and gets married to someone else, that the Kiddushin will not take effect? And for the Gemara, Mila Ishzar Nafka, he learns it from the pasuk where it says Leisia leishzar, that the Kiddushin will not take effect for Ishzar for any other person. And so that Ishzar teaches this, and then the word hachutza goes back on the wife, teaching the halacha about the tzaras erva, where there is a mitzvah of yibum. Two different limudim here. Well, Beis Hillel, fragt the Gemara, now according to Beis Hillel, nami tepiklu mila ishzar. Why wouldn't you learn out that halacha that Kiddushin does not take effect from the words leishzar, and the word hachutza is extra? And says the Gemara, enachanami, you're right, that taka could be learned out from leishzar. Chutza lamali. So according to Beis Hillel, what do you learn from the extra word of chutza? L'rabbi so arusa. This comes to say that there's a mitzvah of yibum even for an arusa. So now the Gemara is saying that even Beis Hillel agrees that the word chutza does not refer to her going to the outside to get married to someone else, but it also refers to this wife here of the husband that passed away, and we're describing her as chutza in what sense? Not like Beishamai, that she's not related, she's not an erva, but chutza means she wasn't fully married yet. She was only an arusa. And that even for an arusa, there's also a mitzvah of yibum. V'hidach, according to Beishamai, how would he know this halacha? Mi chutza ha chutza. Because it could have said in the word chutza, and it says it with an extra hey, so therefore I could learn this halacha as well. So according to Beis Shammai, I could learn from this pasuk three things. The halacha that he began with, which is that at tzaras erva there is a mitzvah of yibum, from the word chutza. The halacha of leish zar, leisia leish zar, that there's no kedusha for a yevama that goes to marry anyone else. And then from the hay, I learned this halacha that there's yibum even for an arusa. According to Beis Hillel, chutza ha-chutza le'mashmalahu. He doesn't hold that this extra hay here is a source for a drasha. Many times the Gemara says that in such a case, the hay is just part of the way the pasuk is written, it's not extra, and it's not a drasha. So this is all Shimon ben Pazi's explanation for Beis Shammai why the tzara of erva there is a mitzvah of yibum. Gemara brings down another opinion. Rava says, Tamayu de Beis Shammai, the reason of Beis Shammai's opinion, why there is yibum for the tzara of erva, the ein iser chal al iser. Because we have a rule that once you have an iser on something or somebody, the second iser will not take effect. What does this mean? So at this point, the Gemara thinks that what we're talking about over here is as follows. You have the tzara of the erva. Every time you have an erva by yibum, that really means that there's two isurim of arayis here. We had this before. Why? Because first of all, when she's married to her husband, so automatically this woman is a eishes ach of the brother. That's the first erva. Eishes ach, which is always a chiyuv kares, if not for the fact that there's a mitzvah of yibum. So when he's still alive, this wife, the erva, is a eishes ach. Besides that, there could be any additional erva. And the Gemara here will talk about the typical example that we learned the drasha from before, which is a chayis ishtay, that it also is his brother's wife's sister. So that's a second erva. So there's two arayis over here. So at this point, the way the Gemara understands this is, when it says, ein iser chal al iser, what the Gemara is saying is, this erva, so number one, she's eishes ach. And because she's eishes ach, so now the fact that she also is the brother's wife's sister, the second erva, achayis ishtay, that second iser of achayis ishtay never takes effect. And therefore, the tzaras erva is not a tzara of an erva, because this iser of eishes ach, again, this iser of achayis ishtay never took effect, because there's already a iser honor mitzad the fact that she's eishes ach. So therefore the tzara is not a tzara of an erva at all. She can go ahead and do yibum. Let's see it in the Gemara inside. The Gemara now will explain this. We'll see here the Gemara actually asks a question on this. Now, Teinach, this hesber of ein iser chal al iser, that this second erva of achayis ishtay will not be chal on the fact that she's already a iser, because of the fact that she's eishes ach. So this is true. Heiche de nosa meis vach kach nosa chai. If what happened over here is that first the brother that passed away married his wife. So the first iser of erva that was here was eishes ach. That now the other brother cannot marry this woman because it's his brother's wife. And then the living brother, after the other brother passes away, the second brother went and married the sister. And now there's a chayis ishtay, a second iser of a chayis ishtay that would come to take effect, and it can't, because the first iser that was there is eishes ach. So there it makes sense, ein iser chal al iser, so the second iser of achayis ishtay never takes effect. The only iser that's here is eishes achiv, and in the case of yibum, that's not an issue, and therefore the tzara is not a tzara of an erva, because there is no erva of achayis ishtay over here. So the tzara can go ahead and do yibum. That's the basis of Beis Shammai's opinion. But the Gemara, if the case is though in the reverse, elo nasa chai v'achakach nasa meis, if the case was that the living brother got married to the sister, so therefore really the erva of achayis ishtay is the first erva that took effect, and v'achakach nasa meis, and then the brother that now passed away went and got married to the sister. So now the second iser that came to take effect was eishes achiv. So in such a case, achayis isha kadim, the iser of achayis isha came first. So how could you say that ein iser chal al iser, that there's no iser of achayis ishtay? Achayis ishtay came first. The second iser of eishes achiv came second. So in such a case, the tzara should be a tzara of an erva, which was chal first. Now Taisus here points out a simple thing, which the Gemara later also will say, that if this is the cheshbon of Beis Shammai, that ein iser chal al iser, and therefore because she's first eishes achiv, and so therefore the secondary erva of achayis ishtay or any of the other arayos will never take effect there. So say that regarding the erva herself. Why would Beis Shammai come and say that the tzara of the erva can go and do yibum? Because she's not really a tzara of an erva, because the second erva never took effect. Say that about the erva herself. The second isser of erva never took effect. She's only eishes achiv, and therefore, in the case of yibum, she has the mitzvah of yibum. So Taisus answers, Gemara says later, because if you're going to be mater, the isser of eishes ach, and allow her to do yibum, automatically at that moment, the erva of achais ishtay will take effect. The only reason the isser of erva of achais ishtay is not taking effect is because once you have an isser in effect, the fact that she's eishes achiv, the second erva can't come. But if you remove that first erva, so then the second erva will be there. So you can't, for the erva herself, you can't be mater the isser of eishes ach. That's regarding the erva herself. But regarding the tzara of the erva, as long as when she was alive with her the wife, the other wife, the erva, and the husband was alive, so at that point she was the tzara of her wife, where the erva of achais ishtay could not take effect. She's not considered to be tzara serva. She's considered to be the tzara of another wife, where there is no other erva besides the fact that she's eis tzach. So therefore, for her, she could go ahead and do yibum. Okay, so now the Gemara says, the answer here is that it doesn't matter in what order this happened. Who got married first, the first brother, the second brother, because the reverse, the concept of ein isser, halal isser, could also be used in the reverse. And let's see it in the words of the Gemara. Even if it would be in the reverse, that first the living brother got married to the sister. Afterwards, the brother that passed away got married to a sister. So the isser of achais ishtay was first. And now, once the isser of achais ishtay is first, the second isser of eishes achiv could not take effect on the isser of achais ishtay. So therefore, havila tzaras erva shaloi b'mokim mitzvah v'sharya. So what Rav is saying is, Beis Shammai holds that in such a case, because that erva of achais ishtay was first, she never was b'chlal in the whole parasha of Yibum. Impossible to do any Yibum over here. So therefore the tzara is not a tzara or a erve that was b'chlal in the whole mitzvah of Yibum. Because the Isser of Achais Ishtay was chal first, so the second Isser of Eishes Achiv can't be chal here b'chlal. She doesn't have b'chlal this whole status of Eishes Achiv, which is mutter in the place of Yibum, because already in advance as an Isser of Achais Ishtay, and therefore the Erve was never involved in the whole parsha of Yibum altogether. So the Tzara can go ahead and do Yibum. She's not a tzara of an erve in the case of a mitzvah of Yibum. Because again, the erve has nothing to do with the whole mitzvah of Yibum altogether. So the Gemara here is showing how this concept of ein iser chal al iser can go in both ways. You can say ein iser chal al iser in a case where the first erve was eishes achiv, and then that doesn't allow the second erve of achais ishtay to be chal. Or as the maskan of the Gemara is that in the reverse, that at first she was achais ishtay, so then the second iser would be eishes achiv does not come into play b'chlal. She's not shaykh b'chlal to the whole mitzvah of Yibum. So the tzara could go ahead and do Yibum. Gemara continues, the next part of the Mishnah, it said, Cholzu b'shamai poislim v'chulu. B'shamai says, if the tzara does chalitza, so then she'll become posel takayin, because this chalitza is legitimate. It's like the Gemara, Pshita, isn't that obvious? B'shamai just said that she's in the mitzvah of Yibum and or chalitza, so of course it's a legitimate chalitza. And says the Gemara, La'afuke de Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. This is being said here to exclude what Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, "Boyu unisaken lehem litzaras sheyacholtzais v'loy misyabmais." Let's come and be misaken for all tzarais that they should do chalitza and not yibum. Because Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, let's be misaken this even according to Beis Hillel to be machmer, to be yotze, what Beis Shammai's opinion was. That really the tzara could do yibum, could do chalitza. According to Beis Hillel, you can't do yibum, or you don't even have to do chalitza either. So therefore, let's just do at least chalitza to be yotze Beis Shammai's opinion. And if we're going to be machmer this way, so then maybe even according to Beis Hillel, this chalitza is a real chalitza, and that should aser her to kayanim. So okay, therefore, kamash malon, that's where the Mishnah here is coming to say, the Beis Hillel machshirim. That Beis Hillel don't require chalitza whatsoever, not even l'chumra, so therefore she'll be kosher to marry a kohen. The next thing the Mishnah said was nisyabmo Beis Hillel paislan chulu. If the tzara was nisyabim to the yavam, then Beis Hillel says she'll be not possible to get married to a kohen, and the reason is because she just got married to someone which is a isakaris, so therefore she's a zayna. So again, the Gemara says, Hasu lamali, why do I need to say this halacha? It's obvious, according to Beis Hillel, this is a Issachadis, and Issachadis is a Zaina. And says the Gemara, Aidi, the Tana Cholzu, Tana Namin is Yavmo. Because the Mishnah says the halacha of Tcholzu, so it also continues with the halacha of Nisyabu, even though there is no unique chiddush over here. Okay, now the Gemara begins a new sugya, which the Gemara will discuss the next blot or so, and this is the halacha of Lois is Gaidudu. And the Gemara brings it up over here because, as we'll see, this is very much related to what it spoke about in our Mishnah regarding the machlokes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and how they wouldn't hold themselves back from marrying one another or using their vessels of one another. Let's see. So now the Gemara begins with a Mishnah in the beginning of Megillah. Tanan Asam, the Mishnah in the beginning of Masechta Megillah says, Megillah Nekras, Ba'achad Asar, B'Shnei Asar, B'Shloish Asar, B'Arba Asar, B'Chamish Asar. The Megillah can be read on any of these 4 days. 5 days, that is. Loi Pachis v'lo Yoser. Not more, and not before Yud Aleph, and not past Tezvav. Amalei Rish. So this is with the Mishnah at the beginning of Megillah, which talks about the days of reading the Megillah. So there's the Yudalit, which is the Purim for the Mufuzar and the open cities. Tezvav is for the Krach and Hamakaf and Chayma, with wall around it from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. And then Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel are from the people of the villages. And we learned this in Masechta Megillah. Now the Gemara focuses on a certain point regarding this Mishnah. Amalei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, Ikri kan loises goidedu. Why would I not apply over here this lav of loises goidedu? So he translates, what does loises goidedu mean? Loisasu agudais agudais. Don't turn the mitzvahs of the Torah that the different groups of Yidden are fulfilling them in different ways. Agudais agudais. Groups of Yidden, everybody fulfills it differently. Isn't that a problem? Comes to the mitzvah of Purim, the halachas, the Megillah, whatever it is, the mitzvahs of Purim, each group of Yidden does it in a different time period. So the Gemara now will try to understand, first of all, what's the source of this lav of Leisus Gaidudu? Hi, Leisus Gaidudu. This pasuk of Leisus Gaidudu, mibayale legufe. Don't we need this pasuk to teach me the simple pshat of what the pasuk is coming to say? The Amar Achmana, what is the Torah saying? Leisasu chabura al meis. A person should not, out of his grief, make a wound in his body when someone passes away. That's what Leisus Gaidudu means. That's a simple pshat. So how do you learn from here that Leisus Gaidudu means not to make groups when it comes to fulfilling mitzvahs of the Torah? So the Gemara answers, Im kain, if that was the pshat, le'mikra loisig gaidudu. Then the pasuk would use the grammar, the word that would be correct would be loisig gaidudu. Do not make a wound in your body. My sis goidudu. Why does it say the term sis goidudu with an extra tough there? So that's a different word. Shma mino lahachi yudasa. It's coming to tell me, do not make these groups agudais agudais. Frek Gemara. So if the grammar is not correct to come to teach me about not making a wound, but it's more correct to teach me not to make groups when it comes to mitzvahs and so on. So ve'eime kulul hachudasa. So maybe that's all the pasuk is coming to say. How do you know it's also coming to say that you're not allowed to make a wound for yourself for a mace? So the Gemara says no, because on the other hand, im kain le'mikra loisa goidu. Regarding not to make groups, it should say in the Torah loisa goidu, or other as actually goidus over here loisis goidu. That would be more correct if we would only be speaking about not to make groups for Torah. My loisis goidudu. Why does it say loisis goidudu? So there's 2 tufs and 2 dalids here. Shmami not tarti. So that's why I know that this pasuk teaches me 2 things. One halacha not to make a wound for a mace, and the other halacha not to divide Klal Yisrael into groups. So this was the question Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan regarding Masechta Megillah. How could there be different times of reading the Megillah? So Rabbi Yochanan answers him, At kan loisha nisa, until here you didn't learn anything that brought you to ask such a kind of question. And he brings him a Mishnah that we learned before Masechta Megillah in Psachim. In a place where the minig is to do malacha, to do work on Erev Pesach until Chatzos Oisim. So they do malacha there. In a place where the minig is not to do work, they don't do work. So over here again you see that there's different minhagim. And this is also an issue that you have one group doing this minig, another group doing a different minig. So isn't this an issue of Leisus Gaidudu? Reish Lakish tells Rav Yochanan, how could you compare? I'm telling you something where there is an Isser. there's an Isser that these people could only read the Megillah at this time and not at the other time. And as the Gemara here brings right away, what does Maneim mean? The plural of the times. Zmanim harbe tiknolem chachamim. Chachamim were masakin different times to read the Megillah. The ones that read it on Yudalit cannot read it on Tezvav, and the same vice versa. So I'm telling you over here where it's mamish distinct that they made it Isser exactly, that you only can read it now and not at another time. That's an issue of Loises Gaididu. That you're creating two different groups, that everyone could only do it in this way, and it's also to do it any other way. And you're asking me a question about a minig, that there's a minig to do malacha or not to do malacha. If there's just an issue of a minig, so then that's not something where there's an issue that it's Loises Gaididu. Okay, so that was the question. If you look in Rashi here, so Rashi explains that by an Isser, like it is over here, benegayah to the Megillah, so it's Rashi says because it's compared to two Titus. If you take it to such an extent, mamish to make it an Isser, so mamish looks like you have two different Titus over here for different groups of Yidden. So the Gemara weiter, so the Gemara explains that really over there's also an Isser. For Hassam, Rav Yechon, it says, and over there, by the minig of not doing malacha out of Pesach, lavi surah havya. Is there no Isser involved in that as well? That you said that it's Isser that only this way and not another way. But Vatnan, we learned over there, Halayla, regarding the night going into Erev Pesach, the night of B'dikis Chametz, Beishamai Oisrin, Beishamai say you're not allowed to do malacha, B'silu Matirin. And B'silu say you are allowed to do malacha. So I see there's a Isser, there's a Heter. This is also something which is not Stam and Minig, but it uses the term Isser and Heter over here. And therefore, over there as well, it's going to be a good. There's two separate groups regarding this Isser or Heter over here. So how could you say that your question begins only in the mission of Megillah? It should begin over there. When you get to the Isser Malacha out of Pesach. Amalei, so the Shlakish gives him a different answer. Hassam over there doesn't look like two groups because Haraya Oime Malachu de Lesle. When you see that there are some people that are doing work, some people that are not doing work, it doesn't look like that you have two different minhagim and you have two different people that are doing two different titles. It just looks like this person is out of work. That's why he's not doing work. Whereas when it comes to reading the Megillah on one day, and the other one reads the Megillah dafka on the other day, over there it's two titles. That's why he's asking the question dafka from Masechta Megillah. Okay, that's at this point it's left as a question. We'll see. The Gemara later will bring a few answers to this, Abaya, and then the conclusion of Rava's answer. But before that, the Gemara will bring now from our Mishnah over here, as we'll see Mitzvah Shem, the continuation.